Welcome to Enlightenment of Change on webtalkradio.net. I'm Connie Whitman, your host, and I hope every week as you guys tune in that you realize the importance of what, for me, the show represents, right? It's all about expanding your perspective. So no matter what the change is that you're going through your life, that you find the tools, whether it's from me or from my wonderful guests, to help you navigate that change. And the purpose for me is to help you guys all live the best life you can, scale your business, grow your client base, whatever it is you're looking to do. I hope I'm a catalyst and part of that for you. So thank you, as always, for joining us this week. So my motivational quote today is by Peter A. Levine, and he says, "Trauma is a fact of life. It does not, however, have to be a life sentence." So trauma, hardship, challenges, we've all had some form of these throughout our life. Some of us perhaps more than others, unfortunately. At the core, when the darkness sets in, what do you do? And how do you deal with these curveballs that life seems to throw our way? And wouldn't it be awesome to have a go-to book, perhaps, to help you navigate and find that silver lining during your darkest days? So, of course, today I have an amazing guest, and her name is Karina Kiljoin. And if I said that wrong, Karina, you could correct me later. Karina is a lifestyle and wellness expert and will release her first book, Chasing Birds, A Journey of Resilience, Grace, and Love, in fall of 2020. It is an honest, inspirational account of the turbulent childhood that haunted her for decades, even through her professional success as a white-collar criminal defense attorney. Now, the panic and anxiety that shattered her seemingly perfect adult life moved her to embark on a painful but ultimately cathartic journey that will surely resonate with others. In her book, she recounts some raw vulnerability, how at 12 years old, she cared for her mentally ill mom and 3 siblings after her father left for prison. From a tender spiritual connection to her golden retriever, Finn, she found a path towards healing and peace. Now, she's been interviewed for various print and online stories, including the Hello Giggles, I think that is, and Origin Magazine, and now lives in Tampa, Florida. So please help me welcome my amazing, awesome, super cool guest, Karina, to the show. So Karina, thank you for being on and for sharing this time with us.
Oh, thank you, Connie, for having me. It's really great to be here. You have a
Yeah.
great show, and I'm honored.
Thank you so much for that and for following me. And I think this is an important topic, and I think your book is truly an important book because you share so much personal insight. And I think when we share of ourselves and tell our stories, people can relate to that, or they know a family member or friend who might be going through trauma like you had gone through. And then you really talk about the tools of how to come out of that trauma so that, people can live their best life as you've done and applied and kind of figured out. So, people have been describing this year as uncertain, which clearly has been, once COVID hit. After these last few weeks, I think it's safe to say that tension, and even more importantly, fear, is absolutely apparent and normal, normal in the new normal, if you will. So can you speak to us a little bit about fear, and what does fear actually keep us from doing or moving forward?
So, like you said in your intro about me, I lived through a lot of trauma for, decades, from early childhood all the way through, I would say, probably my early 20s. And then I dealt with a lot of trauma, which resulted in a lot of fear. And then I ended up stuffing a lot of that fear and those negative emotions inside of me for about the next 15 or 20 years until I was in my early 40s. And so I guess what I can tell you about fear is, and how I got out from under it and how I really changed my life. I would say that fear really does hold us back from living our most beautiful life, the life that we want to live, the life that our souls are yearning for us to live. And I think too, when we talk about fear these days, we kind of have to put it in two buckets. So it's the fear of the external, which is there's so much of that going on right now with the pandemic and how that affects us and people we love. And then there's internal fear, which is the fears about who we are and who we want to be in the world. And so I think if you really step back and you think about what fear is really something that we've created, our bodies do for us. It did for centuries and centuries and centuries of keeping us safe, right? And so back in the day, that was probably pretty important when there were wild animals running around trying to kill us. But these days, that fight or flight, that cortisol, that whole hormonal shift that happens, and that is something that unfortunately a lot of people live in fight or flight most of their adult life, a lot of their childhood life, and they don't realize that they're living in it. And it causes a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress. And I think that for us, when we think about our internal fears, we really have to pay attention to it. And we have to say, now, what is this fear really trying to do? And really, it's trying to keep us safe still. So what it tries to do probably is hold us back. And it sounds more in our head like, oh, don't say that, people won't like it, or don't do that, you'll look foolish. So what we really need to understand is, what's the source of the fear? Is it an external fear? Is it an internal fear? And then we go from there and how we handle it.
And that's really critical because let's face it, there's a lot of external fear. COVID, it wasn't just like the flu because, you think, oh, what's the worst that can happen? You could die. You could die. That's pretty freaking scary stuff, right? But that's that external piece. So this is interesting. And I've never thought about that, right? Fear is fear. Well, not really the way you just described it. That external, most times, like we could not control COVID. You could control how you handled yourself, wash your hands, put masks on, limit your exposure externally, all of those things. So there's an element of control, but we could not have changed COVID, right? It was what it was. The internal fear, if I'm understanding you correctly, is that where we have a bit more control of how we move forward and or decide to move forward?
Yes, exactly. So I love the way you phrase that because I think it's really smart and wise and exactly the way I think that we all need to look at it is there is a factor of fear that comes from watching the news, talking to people, that external feeling of what's going to happen.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, I think what happens is too is that as human beings, we want to fix it, right? We want to make it better. We want to somehow control it. And this is such a powerful example that we can't do that, right? So all we can do is control how we process it, what we do about it, and understanding that, because otherwise it can become mentally, emotionally, spiritually exhausting. You're
Absolutely.
spinning and spinning in this thing of, I got to control this. How I can control this? We can't. We can't. None of us individually can fix it. We can't control it. It's happening all around us. But where the power is and the beauty is in how we individually choose to handle it, because the way we show up for ourselves is the way we're going to show up for the world, for other people, for our family. So where the power and the beauty is in how we decide personally and individually to handle the fear internally.
Yeah, if you're not whole, right? How can you be whole out there? Or how can you impact, what's going out in the world? And it's just like on the plane, right? When they go through the emergency stuff and they say, if you're with little children, parent, put your mask, your oxygen mask on first, because if you save the child and you perish, then what happens to that kid, right? So it's the same kind of thing. I can't control you, I can't control the world, but I can control me. Now, in your career as a lawyer, right? How have you seen that fear affect people? And is there a difference? You know what I'm saying? Like was that
Mm-hmm.
a pinnacle point for you for understanding fear also being a lawyer?
I would say that as a lawyer and as today as a writer, an author, a lifestyle expert, somebody who's here to serve and help and teach, I will tell you that I see fear as a weapon of limitation. It holds people back in various detrimental ways. In my career as a lawyer, I started out right out of law school wanting to be a criminal defense lawyer. And I think a lot of that had to do with my dad going to prison. He went to the federal penitentiary for one count of mail fraud. And he went away for a few years. So I think that there was this subconscious thing of on me that I wanted to somehow, save him, or if I could save someone like him. So I think that's, part of where that came from. And then, I really wanted to have an education because I felt like an education was going to be my way out, like my escape from where I grew up and what I grew up in.
Yeah.
And so I went to law school, and I will tell you that as a lawyer and a criminal defense lawyer, I witnessed it often. First, as when I got out of law school, I went and got on the court appointed list, which is a lot like being a public defender. And I spent the first year or so of my career doing that. And I will tell you that fear in those situations, and even in being a criminal defense lawyer or white collar criminal defense lawyer, the fear you see is that a lot of people make decisions based on fear. They felt like their rights were violated, or they felt like, well, I didn't really do it, but they're offering me a plea deal. So if I get this much time in prison versus this much time in prison, then maybe I take it. And I have to tell you that it's a difficult journey being a lawyer, especially being a criminal defense lawyer. The silver linings are few and far between, and the job doesn't end at 5 p.m. You don't just shut the light off and go home. People's lives are in your hands. So I really have a lot of respect for the people that do that, because it's a really beautiful self-sacrifice to go on through life representing people like that. So I definitely have seen that on the legal side. And then when I shifted careers, and I really always wanted to be a writer, when I shifted into that and started blogging and then writing my book and started my website and sharing all of my lessons that I've learned through the years with people, I started to feel like fear was impacting so many people's lives so negatively. It just, from my own experience, and I've done this myself, I feel like fear it makes you make safe decisions, or worse yet, no decision at all. Yeah. And I've witnessed it in my own life and with people I love and people who follow me and read my writings and watch my videos, that fear will keep you from love. It can cheat you of greatness, and it can close you off from the world. Especially in today's day and age with what's going on, if you let the fear it can really close you off from the world.
And it's true. And with the media, when COVID first hit, my parents are 90 and 91, Karina, and like they were watching it. And I said, you need to stop, because and I'll give you the example why. One day I had to go over and give my mom her shower, and 91, she's very independent, but, gets lightheaded and all of that. So you better tell your father not to go out. I said, what do you mean? She goes, he's going out on the deck every day. And I'm like, good, he needs vitamin D. He goes for a walk at the park. These are good things, Mom. No, he's got to get that virus. So I said, no, you're misunderstanding. And I tried to explain it. And this is what she said to me. I don't know what news you're watching, but the news I'm watching says if you go outside, you're going to get the virus. So think about that. I know it's kind of cute, but it's really not. Yeah. Because how many other people were thinking, oh my God, if I leave my house, right? That fear was so blinding that you don't hear the rationale, because that fear is so debilitating. And now with everything that's going on with the social injustice, what do you how can we combat, maybe that's the better word, how can we combat, that fear of the COVID, right? That external that we talked about, but then how we internalize it. But now with all the social injustice and the cries out there, how do we combat that? How do we get control of ourselves? And I know this is a tough question.
Well, it is, but it's an important question, and one that needs to be addressed by a lot of people. Because it's the unrest that is among humanity right now worldwide. I can't think of another time in history when so many people, almost the entire world, is affected by both of these things. So it's powerful. And so I think my take on it is definitely that, like we spoke of, but I'm going to extrapolate on it, is that we have to understand what we can and can't control. And once we get that, then we sit back and we say, okay, what can I do? How can I personally help the situation? I can do that by resonating at a higher vibe, at a better energy, one that's
Right.
full of grace and love and resilience, and not one that's from fear and not understanding and a lack of compassion. So I feel like compassion is such a huge key to all of this with regard to um, not only the social unrest and the injustices, but also COVID, because how many hard conversations do we have with our friends and our family, just like you were talking about with your mother? Like, okay, this is the way I understand it. And with my adult children, I have the conversation of, where have you been? Have you been tested? You know, you have to have these difficult, honest conversations. So you have to get really clear. So I think that huge part of us as individuals is acknowledging how we feel, sitting with it,
Yeah.
personally, and say, I'm really scared, and here's what I'm scared of, and acknowledging that as a beautiful human gift that you have an emotion like that,
Yeah.
and then letting it go and understanding that I can't control it, what's happening around me, I can only control myself. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to replace the fear with good things. I'm going to replace it with joy and love and laughter, and I'm going to be happier, and I'm going to do what I can to practice happiness and gratitude and being thankful for the things I have and the people I love and what I
Absolutely.
can control. I also think we could be um, turn off the news when it starts to get a little crazy for
Suffocating.
us.
Mm.
Yeah. I also want to be that person in a conversation with friends that that levels up and raises up the conversation, because it's so easy to get in this swirl of, oh, COVID, unrest. Well, it's like any other pattern that you let run through your head. It's going to create more fear, and the cycle continues. So a little bit of understanding where you are in a conversation, in a space, and shifting it into a more positive energy, I think is awesome.
Very
Again,
true.
finding that compassion too when you're talking to people, understanding that maybe they're speaking from fear, and finding a way to explain that, you know, we can only do what we can do, and we can be kind, and we can be compassionate, and we can see people for who they are and what they're going through. And I think that's a huge way to really transition out of fear.
And it's hard because we are a judgy society. If
I
you
know.
don't think like me, you're wrong. Well,
Hmm.
no. And it's funny, Karina, people ask me like what's the point of what's the point of the show? Obviously it's about change and navigating change at the core. And somebody asked me like, why do you like, what's your why with the show? And I really like contemplating the why in my life, right, from the
Hmm.
different perspectives, right? For me, the show, whether people agree with what you and I are discussing and your point of view or my point of view when I share that as well, doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree. Stop and think, why don't I agree with that? Or, oh, that's kind of an interesting perspective. Never thought that. That never entered my radar because I was raised XYZ. So for me, the show is we all have that judgy blindfold, here's my world, and if you don't fall in it, you're wrong. And
Hmm.
hopefully the show in these conversations, people go, oh, I never thought of that. Oh, that's a different perspective. I'm not sure I agree with it, but I never thought about it from that vantage point. So my
Right.
real hope is navigating change, that we could all expand that peripheral view so that it's not just that linear what's in front of us, because that's dangerous. Then you insulate yourself listening to the news that agrees with your opinion. You find friends in neighborhoods that agree with your opinion. And then what
Hmm.
happens is you think you're right and righteous, and real maybe you are, maybe you're not, but who are you to judge me and my life? And I'm sure you went through that. And I want to take a step back. You went through tremendous trauma as a child, and I applaud you because you realize that no matter what my situation was, I'm now in my 20s, right? I could take control of me and my future and you went and pursued school. And God bless you that you picked one of the hardest things to do, criminal law. Like, what? Right? So you didn't even take the easy way out, kiddo, right? You went in there and thought, I'm taking all the gloves off and deep diving. So that you had the thought process of coming from this trauma and pulling yourself up through the bootstraps. It's not like you had parents who were saying, you can do this, go for it, try this, let's apply here, let's apply there. You did it on your own. So what do you say to people who feel, because I think sometimes our fear, and you said it before, we get stuck because we don't know how to, we get stuck, we don't know how to take that next step forward. How did you figure that out? And is that too hard a question to ask? Or, you know what I'm saying? Like, you went from, holy crap, this isn't the best life, to, I need to get an education and I'm in control of me. How did you do that?
So I will tell you that I knew from early on, I would say probably 12 to 15-ish, 14-ish, I knew that I needed to get the hell out of where I was. And I was always, had my nose in a book and that kind of a person. So I will tell you, though, that a lot of it was I was trapped. And my mother would, after my father went to prison, my mother was so depressed she could often not get out of bed. So I would grocery shop, borrow money from neighbors, buy groceries, ride my bike to the store, walk to the store. We had utilities shut off. I remember boiling water to help my brother and sister get a bath. So, I mean, I'd been through so much, and it's not to take away from anybody else's situation, of course, but my situation catapulted me into this feeling of felt like I had to escape almost. And so I knew the way to do that was through education. And I will say, though, that I'm so thankful for that, because I knew enough at the time. I was nowhere near totally healed or happy or healthy emotionally at that point, but I knew enough that education was going to lift me out of where I was, and that was going to be my next stepping stone. And
Sure.
it also was my life circumstance that my mother, when I was 22, my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and I was the only one left to care for her. And so I would commute back and forth to law school while she was dying. And when she died, I was 24 and she was only 44. And I adopted my 9-year-old brother. And that was also a catalyst to me, was that I knew I needed to have a career where I could support not only myself, but my brother. So I will tell you that I'm so thankful and grateful to God, to the universe, to give me the gumption and the wisdom enough to know to get to the next spot and a stepping stone. And then the rest of my healing and enlightenment didn't come, like I said earlier, for 20 years later in my early 40s, when I just had a moment of not a moment, a couple of years of really understanding that I was miserable. I couldn't understand it. And really what I had been doing is stuffing all of those old repressed memories and shame and grief and the things that I wanted to move to the side because I was embarrassed of them and I was ashamed and I didn't want anyone to know that's where I came from. And the beauty is, and I'm sure you've had this experience yourself and other guests on your show, is that then there comes this moment when you realize that all of those things you were ashamed of become the things that you're so grateful for, because they really transformed you into the person that you are. And so that's why I'm so big on the practice of gratitude, and the beauty in that, and how I really truly believe that that's how you find real enlightenment. The most enlightenment you can find as a human being right now in this earth school is through gratitude.
Yeah, and I don't think I don't think we're grateful enough. It's one of my favorite words in the vocabulary, that if you don't wake up from a place of gratitude, you don't go to bed from a place of gratitude, and you're always looking, they have more than me. They're doing better than me. Their situation is whatever, right? And we look from that lack perspective versus I have
Right.
abundance in my life. It's a danger, it's a slippery slope, right? So how do you tell people, and I'm sure you cover this in your book, but how do you tell people how to find that silver lining so they could see the gratitude they should have, or what they should be grateful for in their life right here, right now, in this moment?
So I think that in these moments right now that we're in that seem dark and challenging, those are the hardest times, right? It's like when life punches you in the gut
Yeah.
and you're like, what in the world is there possibly to be grateful for? And I was like that for quite a long time. And I would tell you that how my gratitude practice started was simply just coming up with 3 things a day that I'm grateful for, and every day making them different and making them funny and making them silly. And it's really hard when you're not used to it. Like, so the first whatever week, month, it's like, oh God, really? Like, what am I grateful for today that was different than yesterday? And not such an obvious thing. And the more you do it, like anything, it's a practice. And I just felt like I got better and better at it. And so I got to the point truly where when I wrote my book, that it was such a cathartic experience. I had already kind of been through all the healing and the different therapies and all this kind of stuff to process it all. But when I wrote that book, it was so cathartic. And I realized that when you have that moment of, for me, for being grateful for the abuse I suffered, for feeling grateful for parents who didn't direct me or didn't have any sense, like you're saying, of, oh, apply to this or apply to that, that that built up in me this fortitude of, if I'm not going to do it, nobody's going to do it for
That's
me.
right.
Right. So when you get to that point, then where you have those moments where you see it so clearly that there was no scarcity, there was no lack of abundance. Everything you got was a gift, and it sets you on this trajectory to do, to serve, to share, to be there for somebody else, to share a story and lift somebody up. And I think that when you can see that and find the gratitude in it, I think that that's so powerful. And I tell people a lot, I especially love to talk to like young women about this. And they say, oh, I had this job I hate, or oh, I had this bad boyfriend, and da da da. And I waste all this time. I say, write down 3 good things that came out of it. Because I think that when you start
That's
seeing
true.
everything, it's a pivot and a shift. There was no wasted time. There was
Yeah.
no, everything's a pivot and a shift and an opportunity to level yourself up. So I really try to share that with people and to offer that up to people as a service, like gratitude, gratitude, gratitude.
And it's funny because when you're in the depths of despair, like my intro, the darkest of days,
Mhm.
how do you find the light? Really, that's what we're talking about. And it really is through that gratitude. And it's funny, when COVID hit, because my clients are corporate clients, I physically go and I train and I speak and I do whatever. It stopped. So my income stopped. And my
Mm.
husband lost his job. His company closed. And so we had zero income. But oh, by the way, the household bills, the college bills, my business bills, they kept coming in. And my dad, it's funny, my parents obviously lived through the Great Depression. Save the money, say you better not spend. But I was in the process of getting my book published, right, which was July 16th. It was published, and creating a membership site because I was already starting to shift as I'm aging. It's harder to do all this live stuff and traveling. It's fatiguing. So I thought I have all of this content. I need to digitize it, and then I can even cast my information to a greater expanse to help other people. Right, my topic is sales, and I was already in the throes, and I had teams working for me on this, and the income stopped. So decision: do I spend the money? And it
Mm.
was not a little bit of money; it was a lot of money. Or do I stop and wait and see? Or do I keep pushing through? And my husband and I, we really talked about it. And I said, we had money saved for bills, but now this was above and beyond the bills. What do you do? And we talked, and he said, you got to keep going, because if COVID lasts longer, you need the digital stuff, because then people don't have to physically be there. And if nothing's going to be the same, the digital, the digital is going to be a place to go. And I said, you're right. So we watched pennies in other ways, but I continued to spend that money. Now, people listening are like, she's out of her mind. I would have kept that, we're talking thousands of dollars in the bank. But intuitively, I knew it was the wrong thing to do. It's scary. These pivotal, what you're talking about, and no matter what the trauma is people are going through, crap happens. You have to think, and for me, it's always go back to a place of logic, which is interesting. You have definitely an old soul that you went to the logic of, I can't depend on anybody else. I got to do it myself. How do I do that? That's logical. That wasn't emotional, the woe is me. So I think I'm so thrilled that we've met, and I can't wait to read your book when it comes out in the fall. But this is important messages that you're sharing, because I think people today, we struggle and we get stuck in our stories, and we don't want to move on from the stories, because you said it at the beginning, it's safe, right? It's that fight or flight. Our subconscious supposedly protects us, and sometimes it really hinders our growth. So we have literally a couple of minutes left. What can you share about the book, right? And because I know it's not out yet, but what can you share, and what do you think the value will be for the readers? And I know sometimes it's funny, you have an anticipation of what you think, and then usually, and I have a feeling with your book it's going to be the same. Yes, you accomplish that, but then you accomplish this, like so much more. You know what I'm saying? So what do you
Yes.
hope, though, the readers get? Like, what was your passion? What was your why? Maybe that's the question. What was your why for writing it?
My why for writing it is that I knew that that kind of crazy, tumultuous stuff that happened to me, I tell people, I would tell my therapist, I'd tell my husband. I didn't tell my husband this stuff until, like I was writing the book, we were already married, and he was just jaw would drop, like, what? And I realized I couldn't have lived through that. I couldn't have experienced all of that had it not been for a reason. And I wanted to share and serve. And that was also, I think that's just part of who I am, part of my soul, because even as a lawyer, that's what I was doing. I was serving. And
Yes.
so I wanted to serve in a different way. And the way that I could do it from a heartfelt vulnerability was to share my story that I had kept buried and hidden, covered in shame and guilt, and let it open to the sky. And I wanted to share, and I wanted to serve, and I wanted people to know that their circumstances might be different, but we are all one and the same. We are all one and the same. And if I can do it, you can do it, everyone can do it. It just takes the resilience. That's the subtitle, is the resilience, grace, and love. And I speak on that in so many different ways, because to me it is that trifecta of really being an awesome human being, is being able to be resilient, having the grace to know when to rise up and when to bow down to something, and the love for people, but love of yourself. That's really this huge message, is how I finally learned to really love myself. And I really want that to come out for people when they read the book.
Yeah, I mean, you were coming from this place of shame. How do you love yourself when you're feeling guilty and shameful? And it was funny as you were saying that, right? The tenacity, right? The resilience, the grace, and know when to bow down and when to rise up. I almost cried when you said that, because that word, it's an important word, right? So see, I'm getting emotional. And then love. If we can't love ourselves, how could someone else love? And if we can't love ourselves, how can we bring that energy? You said vibration before. How can you bring that vibration to the world for us to heal the world? And the world needs so much healing right now. Like, we're really in crappy shape,
I
right?
know.
And we need that, I think, that vibration of love universally, so that we can all rise up and feel the grace and resilience. I mean, it's a beautiful subtitle. I think everybody should read the book, because even if you didn't have a severe trauma like yourself, and I know there's a lot of people who have been abused, from childhood, and parents who have been in prison and all of those things. So I do think it's important for people with severe trauma. But let's face it, Karina, we've all had some form of crap in our life, right? No one is immune, and you can't sit there, I can't sit there and say, well, they have a perfect life. There's just no such thing. So I feel like this book, no matter what level of trauma you've lived through or you're living through, this could be a really nice resource for you to, and it was funny because initially you said your nose was always in the book. So if we're able to read, and hopefully people are able to read that are living through trauma, I think that that's the resource. See, that's what I was saying at the beginning of the show. I hope that yours is yet another great resource at a very traumatic level, not just a little element of changing jobs or something. Not that they're not important as well. They are important topics. When we're talking about the trauma that you live through, that's deep stuff, man. And this is heavy. And your book is yet another resource to give people an outlet to say, wait a minute, I love her thought there. How can I duplicate that? So I think your book is going to be a duplicatable toolbox. You know what I'm saying, or a resource for people. Do you agree with that?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes, I mean, I definitely feel that and hope for that. And I also have plans to also turn it into more of a prescriptive, because it's written now as a memoir, and I have plans to turn it into a prescriptive version as well, which I think will be even more so, because what I'm realizing is that,
absolutely,
yes, there are so many different tools that I can offer up to people through those stories. And
absolutely.
that's, again, I think, what we're all here to do is to share our stories, because that is why they happen. And that is our gift that we have, that we can all share with the world, are our stories and what we've learned from them.
And it's our story, but it is our gift. So sometimes the
Yeah.
burden could be a very brilliant gift. I have a colleague, he's been on the show. The Seventh Power was the name of his book. And he was the CEO of one of the oldest companies in Maine. It was a lumber company from 1848. And he literally lost his voice. It's spasmodic, this flight, whatever it was. He couldn't talk. It was painful. And here he's the CEO. And what he learned is that as people came to him and he would respond to them, they knew the answers. So now he dispersed power throughout his organization. And the past decade, from 2010, when he lost his voice from the spasmodic disorder, from 2010 to 2020, his company made more money than all of his ancestors from 1848 to 2010. Isn't that remarkable? So, and he calls that voice, he still doesn't have a voice. It's very spasmodic. It's actually a good word for it. And it's painful if he speaks too long. But he wrote this book thinking that every organization needs to understand this. And he found his voice by losing his voice. So think about that for a second. So
That
we all
just
have our
gave me a
story.
chill.
Isn't that amazing? He is an awesome guy. We're
Mhm.
fast friends, and he's
Oh,
brilliant. But he said, I had to lose my voice to find my voice and give the
oh,
voice to his employees. And it's a
oh.
gift. He calls it a gift. And to hear him speak, everybody be like, he's crazy. It was a gift because he needed to figure this out on his journey, right? Of how I can empower others. And he's doing just such a fabulous job of that. He's truly inspiring. I adore him. Kevin Hancock is his name. It was Hancock Lumber, and his book is the Seventh Power. So yeah,
And
it's
from gratitude, right? He's coming from gratitude. There I am. I have this. It's not, I mean, it's painful. It's not something I'm sure he enjoys going through, but he's grateful for, there's a silver lining in it. That's
absolutely.
beautiful.
Isn't that
Absolutely beautiful.
amazing? So
Hmm.
your story, yours is different trauma, right?
Right.
And he was a CEO, and you were an attorney, and it's different worlds, but at the core, trauma and gratitude, they go together,
Yes.
right? It really
Yes.
doesn't matter what the trauma is. So we're out of time, but I mean, Karina, we could keep going because
I
it,
know.
it's it's a heavy conversation, but it's such a powerful conversation. I
Yeah.
feel like our world is living through trauma at such a global scale that this really is a deep conversation, and I hope people buy the book when it comes out. I want to give let me read the the title one more time, guys, and I'll post it on the Web Talk Radio Enlightenment of Change website. But it's Chasing Birds, and I love that title. A journey of resilience, grace, and love. Just so beautiful. I can't wait to read it, Karina, honestly. I usually like to read the books before I have the guests on, but I know yours was coming out, and I wanted to get this out there so people could look forward to it and again, use it as a resource. If you would like a little more Karina in your life, obviously buy the book, and also go to her website. It's Karina. I'm going to ask you to say it and spell it for me, please.
Okay, it's KarinaKilcoyne.com, and it's Karena, like Karen with an A on the end, and then Kilcoyne, KILCOYNE.com. And I'm also on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And I have a weekly email. It's going to start out to being weekly now next week, sending out lots of fun videos that I do about these topics and blog posts. So if anybody's interested, it's all there, and I would love to have new people involved.
Yes, I signed up, by the way. And also, we didn't get a chance. So, by the way, kiddo, we're going to have to do another, if you're up for it. I know I'm putting pressure when I do it when we're on the show. You have to come on again at the end of the year of 2020. Couple of reasons. I want to look and see, touch base, how's the book, and what is the feedback? What are the people saying right after reading it? Second thing, I think it's a nice way to end or begin the year, depending on when the show would post, for people who are living through trauma to start 2021 in this place of grace, resilience, and love. If you're game, I'm totally game for that as well.
Oh, I'd love it. I love your show. You do a fabulous job. I'd be honored to come back. Thank you.
And I think it's an important topic. We might even have to, Karina, we might even have to do a quarterly show. So just percolate on that and think about it. It's a heavy topic.
I love it.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts to this topic, and I think we need to keep digging into the nooks and crannies. And as you evolve from the book to whatever classes and resources that you're going to make available, I would love to continue to support that and share that, because you're needed. I think you're needed in this world. Don't worry, everybody. You know I'm going to post Karina's information. I'll also post the name of the book so you guys can look for that, pre-order it, and do all that good stuff for Karina. I think it's one of those books we all need to have on our shelf, because you never know when trauma will hit, so that you have it there as an ongoing resource, almost like a tool in your toolkit, right? We gain these skills and put them in our toolkit. To me, your book is part of my toolkit going forward. So thank you again for being on. Everyone, one last thing before we sign off, go to my website, whitmanassoc.com/CSA, and take your communication style assessment, get your little report, find out your communication superpowers, and find out your communication blind spots, and how those blind spots could be affecting how you show up in the world and how you're communicating with others. And my objective with the CSA, it's free, so everybody, it's available to all of you, but also I'm trying to help people find more grace. I just love that word, but communicate a little easier to create more harmony in your life, so we all can raise our vibration. And the CSA is a nice way to focus and develop your own skills. Karina, thank you again. You're lovely. You are articulate. Beautiful book. Again, I haven't read it, and I already know it's amazing, and you're amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. Truly, truly an honor, and truly pleased to have you.
Thank you, Connie. I feel the same about you. Thank you.
Thank you. And you guys, I hope you will join me weekly as we question, build, and discover together that change, trauma, whatever it is you're going through. The resources we share on this show, I really do hope that they serve you and help you navigate and create the life that you desire, but really the life that we all deserve. So I wish you all the best. I think you all know that. You've been listening to Enlightenment of Change with me, your host, Connie Whitman, on webtalkradio.net. I wish everyone an inspired, wonderful week. And let's try to get to the point where we're trauma-free. How about that? Take care, everybody.